Thank you. Okay, on the declarations of interests and transparency statements, do we have any declarations of interest? First of all. I see no hands, so that's a good point. And there's no transparency statements. I do note that I've got a note that Councillor McClellan is subbing for certainly the first part of the meeting to cover for Councillor Yule. Okay, item 1.2, the minute of the board meeting of 1st November. Do we all agree those minutes? And I see no one speaking up, so yes, agreed, so fine. There is no presentations today, sadly, so what we'll just go straight on to is the first item on the agenda after that, which is budget matters, and Ella Stott is going to actually take us through that. Ella, please.
Thank you, Chair. This report provides an update on Nestrans budget monitoring for 23-24 and forecast outturn position. Appendix 1 sets out the summary monitoring to October 23 with a total expenditure budget of 7.458 million. The actual spend to date is 1.651 million. There are detailed requirements for board's approval in Appendix 2. There's no changes on strategic transport fund, with the current position being the 496,000. 16 developments are still to be claimed and no claims made so far this tax year. 3 recommendations for board to consider. Note the monitoring position and forecast presented in Appendix 1. Approve the environments set out in Appendix 2. And note the strategic transport fund positions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ella. Do we have any questions from the board? Yeah. Sandra, Councillor MacDonald, please.
Thank you very much. It was, I suppose it's just an observation about a lot of active travel being wired this time, but particularly I had a question around the AWPR non-motorised user mitigations funding, which is something I might have heard of in the past, but I've certainly forgotten about. And I just wanted to get some clarity around who can use that. Have we used it in the past? Is it a funding stream we should be using more of in relation to the A92 Marker North project?
Ella, please. I think you're muted still.
Sorry. I think Rob needs to step in for this one if you don't mind.
Yep, thanks. Yeah, the non-motorised user fund was an element that came about as a proportion of the AWPRs that had to be spent on active travel. My understanding is that the majority of that has now been allocated, and there won't be an awful lot left. But it obviously is now, what, 5 years since the road was opened. But you know, we have been trying to use up that funding where it's been suitable and possible to do so. But I don't think there's an awful lot outstanding.
Thanks, and I take on board the comments about the active travel and what we're wiring, but I mean, it does seem to me that, you know, a lot is coming out of that in those first 5 elements. That's 250k, and it's going to the city centre master plan streetscape, which of course has got some active travel elements in it, but it's just what it is, I guess, Chair.
Okay, I see Colin, you've got your hand up online. Would you like to come in as well?
No, it was just an interesting point on that. I wasn't sure how much what was the initial funding from that and what it had been used on. You know, I mean, Rab says it's been used here and there for bits and pieces on that. Just something in future. We'd be quite interested to see what it has been used on.
Yeah, I think that's one we would have to come back on, Chair, but certainly happy to see if we can pull together a summary of the key elements that have been that's been spent on.
Happy enough with that, Colin? Okay. Ian Ross. Ian, please.
Thanks, Chair. Just looking at the 1.6 recorded expenditure, but just interested on what the thoughts are on projected expenditure. How's that going to go? Because there does seem to be a lot yet to get through in terms of the annual budget.
Yeah, we're projecting that will come close to the outcome that we have indicated there. But yeah, I think there's certainly a danger that there will be underspend, particularly on the capital side. We are finding it more difficult to bring forward projects because the two local authorities are struggling in terms of resource to deliver these on the ground. We're obviously dependent on our partners to implement schemes on our behalf, and there has been some slippage due to primarily staffing shortages within the two local authorities.
You okay with that response, Ian?
Yeah, thanks. Thanks. Yeah. Are there any implications? That's the only other thing I could wonder about. Thank you.
Yep, sorry, I should probably have said that one of the things we always try and do is maximise the external funding resource. So at this time of year, we occasionally will get a call or an email from Transport Scotland or other partners saying there's money available if you can spend it by the end of the year. So there are occasions that we have, it looks like things are slipping, but they're actually being reallocated to projects funds which we would otherwise lose. So we always maximise external funding opportunities. Nestrans does have the ability to carry forward at the end of the financial year, and therefore it's beneficial sometimes to do that rather than lose funding. So the implication is that things may not always be delivered within the financial year, but that yeah, we try and maximise that external funding, and we can carry forward either through environments or through a carry forward of an existing project where necessary. We would obviously try to minimise that, get stuff delivered where we can, but yeah, that's basically the process, and we try and report that as up to date as we can to every board meeting.
Okay, I see no further hands up, so I take it we agree the recommendations as they're set out in the paper. Okay, again, agreement. I'll take silence as agreement. Okay, item 4.1 is the director's report. Rab, please.
Thank you, Chair. The Director's report is in front of you from page 17. It includes a number of recent developments and meetings that have been attended since the last board meeting. A couple that I would like to bring to members' attention, if I may. One is the Health and Transport Action Plan Steering Group, which was held on the 23rd of November. And there is a draft minute at Appendix 1 for members' information. That also relates to item 6.1, which we will come on to later in the agenda. Also want to mention the RTP Chairs meeting, which was held in Glasgow on the 29th of November, attended by the Chair. Unfortunately, no officer support due to holidays and illness. But the main point of that meeting, which was with the Transport Minister, Fiona Hislop, was around a paper entitled Develop to Deliver. It's basically a paper which summarises what regional transport partnerships do and what we would offer that we could do more of in the future, working collaboratively with COSLA and with Transport Scotland and the Scottish Government. Chair, I don't know if you want to say any more about that meeting, but it's there for members' info as well.
Yeah, okay. So this is actually a paper that's been worked on for a while. To be honest, it's had between the regional transport partnerships. For clarity, at the meeting last week, it was Martin Hall and myself were actually representing us here. Martin virtually and myself in person. I think it was good. We had all 7 of the regional transport chairs there in the room, along with a variety of officer support. There was broad consensus from everybody. I thought, and to be fair, I thought everybody actually quite worked well as a team to actually present to the Scottish Minister. There was 10 separate points that we presented on. My hope had been that timing-wise, it would have actually came today in terms of the paper here. It just, the way it worked, it hasn't. It will be, as Rab said, in the next set of papers. There's no secrets or nothing, but it's been draft for quite a while, working backwards and forwards with the officers. The feedback I felt was actually very good in terms of the Scottish Government and the response, especially in things like the rail freight, and also try to work more with collaboratively with the regional transport partnerships, not just ourselves, but all of us. And I think I would leave it at that at this stage. And if I guess there's questions on either the director's report and or that meeting, we're quite willing to, obviously we'll take them. Yeah, okay, so I see no hands up, so we will just move forward on to item 4.2. It's the weather resilience impact of Storm Babette on the strategic transport network, and it's Paul Finch. Paul, it's presenting. Paul, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. The last meeting, the board requested a short update on the impacts of the Storm Babette on the strategic transport network. We've been pleased to bring this report at this time, just because of the timely nature of it. Clearly, there was a significant disruption between the 18th and 21st of October 2023. There was the highest level of red weather warnings in place. Tragically, the storm was associated with 3 fatalities within the area as well in Aberdeenshire and Angus. Extensive flooding occurred in Brechin, and there were evacuations of properties in the surrounding villages. There was significant disruption on the trunk road network with the closures, and also on the local road network at North Water Bridge, and a washout on the A937 at Merrykirk. The rail network over this period was also implementing a full closures. The policy position is clear in that we recognise the impacts of climate change and the requirement to seek to mitigate the adverse impacts of weather events. And that's both at a local, regional and national level, and also to work with our regional resilience partners in these instances. We undertook initial conversations with the key strategic transport operators. That includes the trunk road response, and we were talking to Amy, who outlined their response during that period of time and highlighted the ongoing contraflow system that's happening at the moment in the Finhaven area. We also had conversations with the local roads officers as well in terms of their response and the issues in terms of managing the closures on the local bridges, in particular the one at North Water Bridge. The rail network, again, undertook full closures over this period with the in response to the weather warnings, with the openings coming up again on the Monday, with the services being resumed at that point. Through the quarterly meetings we've been having with the rail industry, though, we have been asking them for further details of their improvement plan around resilience more generally when there are weather responses, possibly not necessarily the red weather response, red weather alerts, but certainly the yellow weather alerts, and how their investment is hoping to improve the resilience of the network in this area. We also reached out to talk to the coach and bus network operators and received some information there, and that's been a very useful contact we've been made there. We've had discussions with the area manager at Kincardine and Mearns area as well. And I think there's lessons learned about to make sure how the impact of strategic networks are fed into the wider risk response. It's also worth considering and reflecting upon how the communications worked. And whilst there were significant and effective formal communications, there was also quite a significant role of more informal networks such as Fubar News, etc., which also disseminated information over this period of time. In terms of recommendations, we note the information contained in the report. Request the director to engage with transport operators and resilience networks more generally to share the lessons of the impact of Storm Babette and the risks arising from disruption to the strategic network. And also request the director to continue engagement with Network Rail and rail operators and roads authorities on their action plans to improve operational resilience. Thank you very much, Chair.
Councillor Davidson. Isabel, please. I'll let you start.
Yeah, thanks very much. It's an interesting paper, and I think that there's an awful lot more in some ways behind this as well. You know, I got stuck in Forfar with my camper van during Storm Babette, and the alternative way getting home was through Abbey Moor, and that wasn't realistic. And so it meant that an awful lot of people were trying all these little back roads to try to get up the road, you know, to try to look for a more, a more reasonable way to get north or south, I think, as well, rather than a 5-hour drive through Abbey Moor. So, and in the end, we went Kirriemuir, Braemar, and it was fine. But I do think we need to be really careful about trying to push people onto routes that might be unrealistic and force them on, whether intentionally or unintentionally, onto routes that are less suitable for alternative routes when the weather's poor. But I mean, this was an emergency, and it's really hard to do that sort of planning on the spot. But and then the general disruption to rail and bus services afterwards, for weeks afterwards, it was nothing to do with this. But this continued disruption has meant that people have lost a lot of faith in public transport, which isn't very good either. We need to do all we can to encourage them rather than discourage them. But acts of God, well, I don't think that there's much we can do to deal with those, but maybe sometimes there's some things that we could have in place to cope better now that we know that they're so frequent.
I guess, Paul, do you want to come back on that?
I think that's a range of points well made. The key thing there was, I think, clearly at a point when there was severe weather warnings, the difficulties the local and trunk roads and officers had actually in providing a diversion route, because at that point there was flooding across the piece, and I guess that's just one of those operational aspects that needs to be reflected on, and I'm sure that those lessons will be learned and taken forward as we go forward. Thanks.
Miranda, Councillor Radley, please.
Thank you, Chair. I really thank you for this report. I think it's really detailed, and it shows the sheer amount of work that goes into any sort of resilience that is required come a weather event. However, I am very concerned around Network Rail and the impact that ongoing weather events is having on cutting off our rail network, especially north of Dundee. It hasn't just been Storm Babette. There have been a number of closures as a result of yellow or amber weather events that have meant that essentially Aberdeen and further north and parts of the Shire as well have been completely cut off by rail. And I do think that harms trust in public transport, but I would be really keen to see RAB's responses from Network Rail and moving forward ScotRail and how they're going to respond to the storms, because it is a real concern for anything north of Dundee, really. Thank you.
Yeah, certainly it's been noted that there are increased amounts of reactions to weather events, particularly north of Dundee, It's important that we see the investment that Network Rail are putting in place, and we see their action plan for improving on the situation that is pertaining generally at the moment. Obviously, we need to be mindful of the impacts on the infrastructure, and it has to be safe to run at all times. And they have to have that confidence in that. Although I think the important thing is the improvement plan that they're putting in place from today, and how that's going to be working through. And certainly, we've raised that for Network Rail, and we're continuing to push for that information, because again, that is it does appear sometimes to be a disproportionate impact on the northeast of Scotland at this time. Thank you.
Do you want to come back on that at all? No. Okay. I have a few points. When I read these things, I always think, okay, who's not on that list that you've spoken to? So the one that went through my mind was the airport. Because obviously, you know, it's not our primary in some respects. We're thinking road and transportation and freight and people just getting home. But I know anytime the airport can't land in Aberdeen, if they'll try and maybe divert to one of the other airports in Scotland, and if the roads are out, it just seemed, you know, had you reached out to the airports, and then I also thought the similar thing on the ferries, etc. as well, you know, interconnectivity of islands and people getting either to the islands or back again. So I want to be comment on that maybe first of all, Paul.
Thanks. I'll take the ferries first. And I think that there was a double whammy on the ferries, because the ferries were disrupted significantly because of the high winds and swell, and that lasted longer than the impact of Storm Babette on the road and the rail network. And then there was another double whammy for the supply chain for Shetland and Orkney, because their supermarket supply chain came up for the road, which was disrupted as well. So although shelves were beginning to get a bit sparse in the northeast during that period, it is my understanding that that was exacerbated significantly in the Northern Isles as well. And that's not just supermarket goods going up to the Isles, that's also the economic value of the salmon and other economic goods coming down the way as well. So yes, that is important. And the airport, again, it is important. We did not talk to them at this stage, and that's something that we do have regular catch-ups with the airport, and this is something we can raise with them. Although the good thing about the airport is that generally they can react a lot quicker to changes in the weather, and the windows for taking off and landing can respond quicker than they can, say, on the ferries or the rail network on that instance. Thank you.
Okay, and I see Sandra, you want to come in. Councillor MacDonald.
Thank you. Yeah, it was your question that prompted me to remember that I went along to a Port of Aberdeen briefing 10 days ago or so for local members, where we met in Regent Quay, and then we went out to South Harbour. And one of the things that struck me that the CEO, Bob Sanguinetti, was saying was about the impact of Storm Babette on the South Harbour. And I can't remember the statistics he gave us, but it was effectively that, you know, the resilience of the harbour is, you know, X number of storms in 200 years or whatever. And they had come so close to it with something like Storm Babette. So I think it might be worth putting that into the pot as well for just to make, you know, a more rounded approach. And I guess the other thing, just from that, but not to do with this report, is maybe to get them along to share what we got from that information session, because there's some really good stuff out there that's happening in the Port of Aberdeen that I think Nestrans itself would benefit from hearing.
Paul, please.
Yeah, I think that sounds like a good suggestion, and possibly what I could suggest is that we commit to bringing another paper back to the board on this matter. This was a very quick response to make sure we established and we didn't miss that opportunity to miss the timeliness of it whilst it was still fresh in our minds. I think after we've heard more from partners from their lessons learned event, we can clearly bring back a paper on that, and we can pick up on the aspect around the the airport and the ports and the ferry operators as well, and incorporate that in. And hopefully by that time we would have had a stronger response back from Network Rail on their resilience plans as well. So that might be something that we can bring back in around 6 months' time or thereabouts. But I think we wanted to bring this report to you quickly just because of the timeliness nature of it.
Want to come back, Sandra, at all, or I'll take
No,
over.
just to say, you know, when you read the report, it is a very good report. I thought it read very well, and to build on that would be excellent.
Okay, and I completely agree. You know, I do note the 2 recommendations to request the director to engage, you know, and the obviously that means come back, etc. as well, to let, you know, bring us up to date with what was found from that. And quite rightly, yes, we'd like to know what Network Rail are going to say. So if it's 6 months, it's 6 months. If it's earlier, that would also be welcome, to be honest, as well, because it is timely. But with that, are we all content with the recommendations that's in this section, with just the caveated, yeah, director will come back. Okay. Okay, right. We will move on to the next item, is 5.1. And it is Kirsty Chalmers. It is presenting, please.
Thank you very much. This report provides really an update on the Aberdeen Rapid Transit Project and the Aberdeen to Lawrencekirk Multimodal Corridor Study. Both of these are being managed by Nestrans and funded by the Transport Scotland through the Bus Partnership Fund. ART was last reported back in September, where we heard that we were in sort of ongoing discussions with Transport Scotland around the outcomes of the ART Detailed Options Appraisal Report. So moving forward, just to summarise, following receipt and consideration of the comments that were made by Transport Scotland, we had quite a detailed meeting with them in Edinburgh on the 27th of September with consultants Stantec and the wider Transport Scotland team, really to discuss and agree a way forward. This was a really helpful, constructive discussion on the outcomes of the work to date and how we continue to progress the ART project. It focused a lot on a number of risks and issues that related to the BPF programme as a whole, and that Transport Scotland had raised in their comments, particularly around some of how the findings of the ART work relate to and inform the corridor studies. Some, you know, issues and risks they'd identified that relate to both the appraisal and assessment of ART and also to its implementation further down the line. Those discussions really didn't really highlight anything that was a showstopper, but really sort of risks to recognise and manage going forward. So one of the actions coming out of that meeting was really that we would update the programme risk register to reflect those comments. We will amend the detailed options appraisal report where relevant and undertake some work to scope out the next stages of the project, which it was agreed at the time would be to move to a strategic business case. This very much continues to progress the work of the ART project within the sphere of the strategic business case, which means that we don't at this point in time need to go through a formal gateway review process with Transport Scotland. The strategic business case will build on the STAG work that's been undertaken to date, but bringing in further analysis, particularly to firm up on some of the 5 case models, the value for money, the financial case, including affordability, as well as establishing sort of preferred phasing, governance and delivery models through the management and commercial cases for ART. We've got a further workshop with Transport Scotland. We're currently working to develop that scope to put that back to Transport Scotland. And we have a further workshop with them in December to discuss and agree that. And it's intended that will be followed by a submission to the BPF fund for funds to carry out that next stage of the work. I also anticipate that bid would include a request for continuation of the budget for engagement activity to support the suite of BPF projects going forwards. In the meantime, we're also continuing, work is ongoing on the routing appraisal, which we mentioned at the last report. We are, as I said, testing various permutations of the ART vision for routes within the ASAM model, and we anticipate that being brought back to members for discussion in the new year. What we're hoping to do with that is hold a workshop for all elected members across Aberdeen City and Aberdeenshire once we've got the results of that ASAM testing, so we can come back with the sort of the data behind some of the options that are there and discuss those in a bit more detail. Really looking to fully explore the benefits and the impacts of those different options and the service routings in order to be able to make final recommendations on a desired ART network, which will then allow us to inform work on the corridor studies and to further inform recommendations on programming for ART going forwards. the Aberdeen to Lawrence Kirk multimodal corridor study, that's also being funded, is managed by Nestrans and funded through the Bus Partnership Fund. That was last reported to board in April, where there was an update on the progression of that multimodal corridor study, noting that the previous funding for that was the Local Rail Development Fund, and that had come to an end. Since then, consultants ACOM have been appointed to continue work on the study, and they're very much just been closing out some of the remaining comments on the case for change and progressing through the preliminary and detailed options appraisals. There's been agreement reached with Transport Scotland that the bus partnership funding can be used for this study going forward to support the completion of it. And just worth noting that within this multimodal study, the strategic options for bus, ART, rail stations, active travel and other supporting measures are all continuing to be appraised through that project. So there's a couple of bullet points there, really just summarising what's been agreed with Transport Scotland in relation to that study, again confirming the funding through the Bus Partnership Fund. And we'll continue to engage with Transport Scotland as we go through that project and report back at a future point. The recommendations of the report really are to note the progress in relation to ART and also to the multimodal corridor study to the south. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I guess I'm just looking around to see if any questions. I guess one question I would have just on the timelines for that multimodal study. Just do we have any idea when it might actually be coming back or be completed, for want of a better word? I
may refer to Paul for that one. That's all right.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. There's 3 steps we have to go through. One is the case for change. That has actually been substantively complete for a very long time, although because of the transfer across the Bus Partnership Fund, they've asked a little bit of a consistency with some of the previous corridor studies. So that's in hand at the moment, but we see that as being completed very quickly. The preliminary options appraisal, the draft is actually with the client group at the moment, so we'll be anticipating bringing that back to this board early in the new year, hopefully the next board. The stage after that's a detailed options appraisal. We would like to see that taken forward, and I suspect that will be more summer 2024 by the time we've completed that. Obviously, there's a wide range of schemes potentially within that envelope of work to be undertaken, but I'm certainly confident of having that in place. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor MacDonald, Sandra, please.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to ask around the risk register, and perhaps if it's possible that the board could be cited of that, just to understand the perhaps the levels, the likelihood, and also mitigations against that risk. And secondly, it was really around the STAG work, we know tends to focus most on the economic and financial aspects of things. And it's really just how we're going to factor in the more social and environmental elements of, the ART, because, that's what drives a lot of it as well. It is, and maybe that'll become a lot clearer at the workshop in the new year.
Yes, please, Kirsty.
Yeah, firstly, the risk register, yes, we can bring that back. It's been a work in progress probably since we had a risk register before. It's very much been updating it. That will be one of the things I think we were looking to discuss and submit back to Transport Scotland for that meeting in December. So I think, yes, we can do that. In terms of yes, I think yes, absolutely on the social aspects and the benefits of ART. The strategic business case will follow the 5-case model, and those social benefits and the wider things like the health benefits and the it's not just about the economics of it. That will have to be woven very strongly through the narrative of it. Often with the outcomes of these tends to focus on a benefit cost ratio, which very much brings in the sort of economic side of things. But I think we recognise with a project like ART, the narrative around all of those other elements is equally as important, and I would hope that will come through that strategic business case process. But I think there's also some very fundamental questions around about the delivery model, the affordability, and the demand that we can look to generate through it. ART and its commercial viability. I think there are some fundamental questions around that that we'll kind of look to explore in a bit more detail through that are, I think, equally as important.
And I guess, are there any risks around, not getting the request for the continuation of the engagement activity for the projects? Because I think all of us, and having been over in Belfast, that was key to success, was having the right marketing and comms and engagement with all sorts as part of the ongoing and continuous engagement.
Yes, and I think so trying to make the case to Transport Scotland that yes, we want to see that funded. I haven't had anything to indicate that they're not supportive of that. What the instruction from them has been is, because it's a capital fund, you need to wrap up that request into the business case process, into the appraisal process. So we need to link it strongly with that, which I don't think is a problem. So we would be looking to submit a bid to include that within our kind of, this is the funding we need for strategic business case and the associated comms and active comms and engagement, which the indications I've had so far is that that's not that's within the scope, but we just need to keep that in mind.
Okay, I see no further questions, so I take it we're all noting the recommendations. Oh, yeah, the risk register, I take it you'll just circulate that out as opposed to it being a separate report.
I think that's something that we would circulate around board members rather than being a separate report. I think that would be appropriate. Yeah.
Okay, with that noted, we will move on to item 5.2, which is the Regional Active Travel Networks Development Update, and it's Paul. It's presenting. Paul.
Thank you very much, Chair. The purpose of the report is to update the board on the work that's been taking place around the Regional Active Travel Network project. This was commissioned in June 2023. Consultants Jacobs are assisting Nestrans, but also very much a team involving the two local authorities as well on the development of this plan. It's a plan that will help us identify the key routes, the priorities of those routes and the hierarchy of those routes within the Aberdeen City Council area, the key towns within Aberdeenshire, and also those key regional linkages between them, focusing not only on cycling but also walking and wheeling as well. There's a consistent policy ambition regarding active travel across the client group. There's a number of existing active travel proposals, identified network gaps at different stages of development. We want this active travel plan to help provide a clear long-term direction and also clear standards for those linkages that we're identifying, and also to assist with the prioritization of that as well. And this follows very much the advice which was in the Scottish Government's second Strategic Transport Projects Review, the National Transport Strategy, and follows on from what is in the local and regional transport strategies. The work at the moment is at a stage where the long-term network has been defined. We are the working groups in both Aberdeenshire, the regional network, and Aberdeen City are continuing to work with the consultants to refine that and to consider the presentation of that. There's been key stakeholder consultation with the cycling groups, the disability groups. Useful feedback has been received from that as well, which has been incorporated into the work. There's been work identifying where on the network there may well be conflict points. And we look forward to continuing the refinement of that network in the new year. And then we hope to provide that as a consultation exercise to the wider public. But we would also like to include within that, or prior to that, an elected member workshop so we can present the work to date, and we can get that feedback at that point as well before we go out to the consultation process. The final network will then be used as a key tool in terms of programming and prioritising the work that we have going forward. It is seen as important in terms of the funding bids that we will be going through with Nestrans and the Active Travel Transition Fund, etc., going forward, and also help understand those wider complementary measures that are which would support that going forward. The recommendations are at the moment to note the ongoing work around this project and to request further report back to the board on the outcomes of that stakeholder engagement and consultation exercises and next steps after that. Thank you very much, Chair.
Yeah, I guess thank you for that. Any questions do we have? Okay, a few. So what I'll do is I will start with people in the room and then I'll move to online. So Sandra, you got my attention first, so please.
Thank you very much. I was just to ask on the STPR2. I guess there are a few projects which are relevant to the northeast of Scotland. Not all the projects are, and of course the flagship one would be the ART. But I just wondered. I just don't have a sense myself at the moment on what's happening with those projects and you know what's happening in the northeast with relation to those projects. And I'm guessing that this is one of those projects which is kind of national, but we have our own particular regional element to it. So I really had a question around what's happening with the wider strategic projects, and I guess my second question was just around when it might be that we have that stakeholder engagement and so on, whether you know in terms of a timeline.
Thank you very much, Councillor MacDonald. In terms of STPR2, we are assured by Transport Scotland that they will be bringing forward an STPR2 sort of action or delivery plan shortly, either this calendar year or this financial year, on the progress and the actions they're taking forward on the, I think there are about 32 items listed in the technical annex for STPR2. I think it's important to note that notwithstanding that, where we have the opportunities, the regional partners have been trying to align their activities which clearly come out of the STPR2. The Regional Active Travel Network is one of them. The work we've been trying to progress on rail freight is another one. Yeah, so where there is alignment, we are, as a regional partnership, we're not holding back on, oh, let's wait for Transport Scotland to give us the green light. Where we see there's a delivery pathway, we've been seeking to use the resources we have available to progress things. In terms of that elected member engagement, we may align that with the routing network for the ART, depending on the timescales and depending on how the programs fit out. But certainly, we would hope that to be in the first couple of months of the new calendar year. That's the plan.
So Ian, please.
Thanks, Chair. Sandra pinched most of my question, but just to follow on from that then, in terms of actually people seeing change on the ground, in terms of actually developing the network, because I'm sure you will understand there's a deal of skepticism out there about, we're good at consulting and we're good at seeking views, but we're not quite so good at delivering. That's generally, and it's not Nestrans in particular. I just wondered when, realistically, we have the document is the strategy is complete, or the network plan is complete, and we can then start to deliver on that, and when those who travel by active travel actually start to benefit from that, rather than just having again, no offence intended, a nice shiny worthy document on the shelf or online.
Paul.
It is important that we have a coherent and prioritised plan to work to. The scope of the plan is very ambitious. but we recognise that there has to be that level of ambition to achieve the modal shift and that change that people are looking at across the whole of the region, and that goes across all the towns of Aberdeenshire, the connections between them, the quiet routes, and also within Aberdeen City. We would imagine that the ultimate delivery of this plan may well take decades, and that's being realistic. However, we would like to see that there are prioritised links which hopefully align with the other priorities that we've already been working on, that will be able to get to that point of delivery much sooner than that. And we can see the sorts of construction that's happening on Craigshaw Road at the moment, the sort of proposals that are coming up for the Harbour Link Road, and some of the other proposals in Aberdeenshire coming through within the next few years.
Councillor Reid, Glenn.
Yeah, thanks, Chair, and thanks, Paul. Sorry, I'll keep my camera off just now as my internet, my broadband connection is really quite poor. Paul, I'm not sure if this is the right one, right question at this time. It's either this paper or the next paper, but generally it ties in very well. I know you'll know I'm frustrated straight away, as since I've been elected to the board, I have been asking for about 1.5 years now for a map to be produced, and I've been promised it twice. I was promised it just 2 meetings ago that would be done by the end of this year, and I was disappointed in the paper that it doesn't have it now. I know there are reasons there, etc., for it not coming, this particular one due to staff absences and illnesses, etc. So I'd be looking really for an assurance that, given that I was promised that it would appear by the end of this year, that it will be there for the next year. I'm happy to assist in any way you want. I mean, what we're looking for is an overarching map which will detail all the current routes, all of our planned routes, their connectivity, include the key dates of inception, design date, completion target date. It could come as a twofold map or plan, one which is a graphic physical map showing the routes, etc., existing and planned, that connectivity, so members of the public can see what exists, what is coming, and when. And the other would be a Gantt style progress chart, which will enable everyone to track and pressurize on any timescale lapses, etc.
Yeah, thank you very much, Councillor Reid, and your expectations have been very clearly communicated to this board over a number of meetings, and we fully recognise what you are looking for. I had hoped at this point that we'll be able to be slightly further on with the regional active travel network planning, such that we would have that resource to provide that plan, and also that prioritisation, which would have tied together the existing plans or what we have on the books to where we are going with the regional active travel network. Unfortunately, we're not quite able to pull that together. I think the other aspect which is important is that we have also been asked to prepare a 5-year capital plan as well, and I think that feeds into that narrative around not just bit by bit communication, but that wider program, which you are clearly looking for as well. And we're also anticipating from the Active Travel Fund not only capital allocations, but also support in terms of assisting all the delivery partners and improving the delivery pipeline of how we were able to get schemes from feasibility through to on the ground development. I think the paper that is after this one sets out some of that aspiration, but also sets out some of the challenges that Nestrans officers and local authority officers have at this point in being able to provide that full Gantt chart aspiration in terms of particular dates of when things will get on the ground, because we usually are progressing projects through a step-by-step process, and when it becomes a committed project within the delivery teams, that then enables more certainty around construction dates, etc. However, it is reasonable to ask for target dates in that sort of policy environment where that is what we're aiming for. Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Councillor Reid.
If I could come back, if you don't mind, Paul. Thanks very much for that. But we did commit to doing this by the end of this year. My point is that I believe we must know what we have existing as far as infrastructure is concerned. We must know what our current aspirations are, how it all connects together. And surely at the bare minimum, we could actually put together what I've requested with that, and then we could add on to it later on. But we need to make a start somewhere. So members of the public, as well as myself and other elected members of this board, know what we have got, what we intend to deliver, and they can actually see where, how this all comes together.
Yeah, I take your point, Councillor Reid, and we have committed to come back to the I think in the future programmes, the future paper, to continue to develop the report that we have before us to provide as much of that information as we can for the February board.
I'd like to put some timelines on you. I'm conscious of some of what Councillor Reid's actually saying. For things that we know about right now, I think we should be able to actually put that together relatively quickly, to be completely fair. I take the aspirational aspects of things that we don't know so much about, but I still think we should be able to put even a guide, even an estimate together, etc. I do get where Councillor Reid's coming from. And, to me, it is coming into what is the next paper as opposed to this one, to be completely honest. But I'm fine with having the discussion now because it's yourself, Paul, that's presenting next anyway. So I take the recommendations that's on here. There's another speaker wants to come in, so we'll do that. But I think we do need to have a little think about how we respond and basically say look to what Councillor Reid's actually asking for as well. Okay. So with that, I'll bring in Colin, please.
Yeah, thank you very much. Just one question, and I may have missed this because my internet sometimes goes a bit funny, but we're having a consultation possibly in the first 3 months of next year. When's this report going to be ready?
We would anticipate the regional active travel network, and this depends on the outcomes of the consultation, because the consultation may mean we have to do things after, change our thinking or the prioritisation. We might have to do more work on that one, but I would imagine that we'd have that report with the consultation finished at the end of quarter four this financial year, and then moving into quarter one of the next financial year, so prior to the summer of 2024.
Okay, so how does that tie in with any budget requests or for next year then? Are we still going ahead with those from government at the moment if we don't have the strategic priorities?
I think that there is sufficient work that has been done on the regional active travel network and the prioritisation to make, as well as the backlog of work that we have on the ground at the moment, to inform those budget requests.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I'm conscious of what Glenn Reid, Councillor Reid's asked about. Do we feel it best fits on this paper, or are you quite happy to amend it into the next paper at this point?
The two papers are linked, but I think if we go on to the next paper, and then we can pick up on Councillor Reid's point at the end of that one.
Okay, so in terms of this paper, we'll note what the recommendations, etc. are, and I think the only thing I would add is just the timelines. If we get good clarity for that, particularly if you're talking about workshops for members, so people have got that early in their diaries and everything. And with that, we'll move on to what is the next paper, and it's the strategic active travel routes. And again, Paul, it's yourself that's presenting, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. Again, the discussion has obviously cascaded into this. The two reports are clearly linked in that the work we're doing on strategic active travel routes, and this is almost a progress report on where we were last year, is also being augmented by the work we're doing on the regional active travel network. the 5-year budget process and the interactions we're having with the Active Travel Transformation Fund being promoted by the Scottish Government and Transport Scotland, as well as work we're doing on the Active Travel Action Plan. I've set out in section 2 there the policy. I've set out in paragraph 2.2 the respective delivery roles, and that Nestrans works very closely with our local authorities in terms of delivery on the ground, and also those aspects are also subject to local authority governance and prioritisation processes around their physical, the capital resources, but also their human resources as well. The next sections take us through the key corridors which have been identified in the regional transport strategy: West Hill, Inverurie, Stonehaven, Ellen, Bankery, and we also provide updates on the work on the Deeside Way and the Full Martin and Buchan Way going forward. A lot of these corridors are tied in with the queries or the progress of the multimodal corridor studies. Some of these are also more closely related to other projects that have been taken on the ground in Aberdeenshire. And I think relative to the status report we provided last year, it's good to see the progress on the areas Merca North in particular, and the consultation that's come through there, and also the work that's been done on the Aberdeen city side of the boundary at that point as well. We also reflect on the progress on the Full Martin and Buchan Way, and also on the Deeside line as well, which is alongside what's happening on the Bankery corridor as well. In terms of future development opportunities, we're highlighting the funding opportunities that are coming out of Transport Scotland and the Active Travel Transportation Fund. We've also talked about the development of the Nestrans Active Travel Plan, and also the growth of the regional active travel governance, which over the last 6 to 9 months has been focused on the regional active travel network, but we are continuing to develop that into a standalone regional active travel liaison group as well, due to the good working we're having with our local authorities in that place as well. The recommendations are to note the current policy delivery responsibilities for strategic cycle routes in Nestrans area. Notes the status, progress and next steps and the available timelines for the strategic routes. Notes the future opportunities for the strategic routes with increased funding and a national review of delivery mechanisms, and also improves the ongoing implementation of improved regional governance arrangements for the Active Travel Action Plan, as well as the commitment we've already had about continuing to bring back another paper going forward, which we discussed on the last paper. Thank you very much, Chair.
Okay, questions. I see Councillor Cox. John, please.
Yeah, thanks. I'm not sure if I'm disappointed or I maybe got it totally wrong. I just wondered why the Banff strategic active travel bridge is not included here. I know that's the project, the bridge, but it is the active travel between Banff and Macduff is quite important. So if we don't include it in our plans, all the papers, then it's perceived as not being an important initiative, considering the amount that we've invested already in the project. I just want clarification there, Paul, why it's not here, or if I got it totally wrong. Thank you.
On this paper, we focused on those strategic corridors which were outlined in the regional transport strategy. We recognise, and all partners recognise, the importance of the active travel bridge up in Banff and the success we've had in attracting Sustrans funding for that. And I think that as we have, as Councillor Reid has indicated, the subsequent paper to this, where it is beyond just those 6 corridors and the 2, the Deeside line and the Full Martin Buchan line, would provide an opportunity to pick up on the progress of that project.
Colin, please.
Thank you. Yeah, again, just picking up on what was said earlier, is that the 5 routes are there, and we've known about them for years and years. And so it kind of just 2 things about it is there an aspirational date for any of these to be completed? Because as kind of we spoke about before, but we know that detailed dates are difficult to do, but with the basis of having these, I can't remember how long we started talking about these before. And the other thing that kind of goes along with that is, you know, how much money has actually been spent so far on consultations and plans that have been put back to square one again and redone and put away and then picked up again. Do we actually know how much we've spent over the years on all these plans with not an awful lot of actual tar on the ground to show for it?
Paul, a couple of good questions there.
I don't have the figure in front of me for the for that figure. Obviously, the nature of appraisal and design is sometimes iterative, and there is often a requirement to go back on things as circumstances change, as planning applications come in and new opportunities arise. So just because sometimes we have to take a step back, sometimes that is necessary as part of the project development process, albeit it is frustrating. We have set out in the regional transport strategy the priorities, and we recognise, and we have recognised in the previous active travel delivery plan, the priorities on the 5 commuter routes. Whilst there has been incremental progress, we need to continue that, and I think that we had all anticipated delivery by now, or more substantive delivery on them by now. And we would certainly be trying to prioritise that, subject to what comes out of the regional active travel network within the next 10 years. But one would like to think that we'd be able to provide firmer comments on that in consultation with our local authority partners on what might be a realistic completion dates for those at the next report. Thank you.
Colin, okay?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, that's good. There'll be some dates.
Sandra, Councillor MacDonald, please.
Thank you very much. I did a very rough and ready map myself of the routes, just to remind myself when I was reading the report. And for me, you know, the definition of active travel is in this context very much about cycling, I think. But I don't want us to lose sight of some of the good work that's going on around walking as well. And I think that comes back to Councillor Reid's you know, request for our map. But for me, there isn't just one map. There's that kind of active travel cycling routes, there's walking projects, there's the multimodal corridor studies which impact. And sometimes I think we are, just as you know, as Nestrans and our partner bodies, there is a lot going on, and sometimes I think we do lose sight, not lose sight, but that the complexity of it becomes a little bit too much. Because on the appendix, I would like to see, rather than just case for change is all complete, I would like a little bit more information about when that was started and when it was completed, because I think we do need to scrutinise a bit more about you know, the length of time that some of these projects are taking to progress, and indeed, as Colin Allen has said, the money that has been spent in it, because this is you know, taxpayers' money. We need to understand that, and so I would you know, maybe just echoing what others have said, seeing a little bit more information around that would be very helpful. And my specific question, I think, to you, Paul, would be around number 4 there, because in the report it says that a formal governance structure is yet to be implemented, but because we've got this sort of informal structure at the moment, but the recommendation says we approve the implementation of an improved regional governance arrangements. I'd rather see that first and scrutinise it before we actually approved it. But I'm not sure if I've maybe picked up wrongly on that last recommendation in the report.
Thank you very much, Councillor MacDonald, and there's some pertinent observations there, which I think link into the other comments that other councillors and board members have made. We have established, or we are establishing, that regional governance structure. We have based it on what has worked successfully thus far on the sort of the steering group for the regional active travel network, and we are wanting to develop that further into the beginnings of a regular grouping beyond what we're doing already with the strategic officers liaison group and other ad hoc project meetings. We are planning to have that on a sort of a 4-weekly basis going forward with the key managers and officers involved. And thereafter, I think that group would probably want to be delivering or setting out if there are other people we need to invite to that and how we would want to report that back to the board. So I think that's another thing that we'd probably want to come back to, and possibly that would require an amendment of the wording as it is in the recommendation.
You content with that, Sandra, as an answer? Well, yeah. Okay, so all right, so if I take it properly here, we're going to amend that wording to allow us to come back. And we're also going to add in, I guess it's a 5th recommendation concerning maps, etc. As it's 1 map, 2 maps, 3 maps. Obviously, yourselves come back with what you feel is appropriate. And the same with, how would you put it, Gantt charts or timelines, etc. It goes with them. Is that via Representative Rabi, we've taken the discussion? Yeah. Okay. So are we all happy with that for 5 recommendations? Okay. All right. Item 6.1, Health and Transport Action Plan Review and Annual Report. And it is Andrew Stewart that's presenting, please.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, everyone. The paper before the board concerns the HTAP annual report for the financial year 2022 to 23. The board members are asked to review the annual report and just seeking your approval for your part to progress the HTAP annual report to the 3 community planning partnership boards. If I can just take a couple of minutes to sort of refresh the sort of background information. As you'll know, the issues of health and transport are frequently interdependent, but have historically been considered professionally and politically as separate issues. This has changed since the National Transport Strategy included health and wellbeing as one of its 4 pillars. The COVID pandemic also significantly increased awareness of the dependencies that health services have on transport systems and public health more generally. The transport system facilitates access to jobs, education, shops, leisure, and other essential services, including health, as well as having a key role in the wider economy. Access to these daily essentials is of central importance to an individual's socio-economic status and levels of neighbourhood social inclusion and exclusion. Therefore, availability of accessible, affordable transport may also in itself be regarded as a determinant of health. Different modes of transport may also affect health through a range of other determinants. Individual travel choices can have health impacts not just on that individual, but on the wider community through externalities, including pollution, risk of injury to others, and community severance. But equally, individuals' travel choices are often determined by the availability, affordability, and practicality of the different modes in their communities. So these interconnected issues have effects on population health, but also on the practicalities of ensuring access to health and social care and the running of those services. As the largest employer in the country, the NHS is one part of what we would health being obviously much wider than the NHS, but the NHS itself, of course, being a major generator of trips, so a key partner. So in Grampian, there's been an established partnership between a health and transport partner since 2008, and its purpose is to enable providers of transport, health and social care to work together in a more coordinated manner in order to improve outcomes and efficiency of service delivery, both in reducing the adverse impacts of transport choices on public health and in improving access to health and social care. And the group is overseen by a steering group chaired by Jerry Donald and two subgroups, one on transport and public health and the other access to health and social care, which is chaired by Paul Finch. So we've got quite a wide membership that covers the NHS, Nestrans, ambulance service, 3 local authorities in the health board area. We've agreed representation from the third sector interface bodies, the health and social care partnerships. We have a member of the Mobility and Access Committee for Scotland who advised the Transport Minister sitting on the steering group. Recently, we've also had attendance from a senior policy person in the Scottish Government Health Directorate. They're currently preparing to go out to consultation on a delivery plan for travel to healthcare that we've been able to facilitate a number of our partners to respond to that draft before it goes out to consultation. So at the moment, the work of partners in Grampian over these years has been getting a lot of attention, and there's been a lot of interest in the journey that we've been on in Grampian as other regional transport partnerships are being sort of engaged by Public Health Scotland on the sort of question of how to go about engaging each health board and creating something similar to HTAP in their areas. Also, just briefly touch on the review. The document was last reviewed in 2014. A lot has changed since then. The creation of the health and social care partnerships, the COVID pandemic, the decline in life expectancy in the 4 UK nations since 2012, accelerated use of online appointments, the Transport Act in 2019 giving health boards a duty to work with community transport bodies, the climate emergency being declared, the creation of Public Health Scotland, of course, new regional and national transport strategies, as well as the global energy and cost of living crisis. So a lot has changed. And the review is in the 3rd of 4 phases of development. Last week we had a workshop, the 29 different stakeholders attending, helping sort of validate the areas of focus that we've identified. And the annual report itself sets out the work we've done with securing funding for NHS Sustrans Engagement Officer to be embedded, although that unfortunately has come to an end through changes in national funding. We've completed the NHS Spaces for People funding. NHS Grampian was one of only 2 health boards in Scotland to benefit from the Spaces for People funding. So 256,000 of improvements across the NHS Grampian estate have been put in place, and some pictures of that in the annual report. We've, through the HTAP, been able to sort of secure and sustain ongoing public health input into things like the health impact assessment of the City Council's local transport strategy. There's a lot of trying to ensure that colleagues in health and social care are linked into transport corridor studies and other such consultations. The report highlights some innovative work in Moray, linking an active travel project to the health journeys of people recovering from spinal injury, and also women's aid and other vulnerable groups. So we're kind of particularly interested in how active travel can sort of more directly target people on a health recovery journey, and to hone in on the potential benefits it can have in those outcomes. We continue to jointly fund Think. We continue to hold Grampian Volunteer Transport Awards every 2 years. The report highlights the local and national links that we have between quite a diverse mix of stakeholders working on everything from transport poverty to hydrogen buses. Our partnerships been able to help extend the campaign reach of work such as Get About, and there's the sort of the general sort of area of influence that we're trying to have with partners at a national level. So I'm happy to take any questions and any comments. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Davidson. Isabel, I saw your hand first.
Chair, this is a
Yeah, thanks very
transparency
much.
statement.
This is a really interesting paper, and it's full of such brilliant stuff. You know, the work that's been done is absolutely tremendous. And I had a couple of comments. I just wondered, are the stats behind this available? So can I see how many people are using the Think service in my ward, for instance? You know, so I could promote it more or find out if there's pockets where they struggle. So is there any information behind all this? Behind the review available. And the other one was on page 55, there's information about trips and falls during the winter. And I wonder how much of that information is gathered, because it's something as a council we would really like to see. And we had understood it wasn't available in this area. And you know, it's very important to us as well to be able to identify the more significant problem areas. So again, is that information available? I mean, how much of it is collected, and is it available? And can we have access to it as a council? Because it would be really good to be able to identify, you know, the more problematic areas. So this last couple of days, apparently the whole of Aberdeenshire has been problematic. So, however, but I really commend you on a good paper.
Andrew, please.
Thank you for. It's very much a team effort, though, and the report sort of reflects that team effort. It is built on the goodwill and willingness to cooperate from a lot of different organisations, rather than it being a heavily sort of budgeted endeavour. So there's a lot of cooperation that goes on to deliver these actions. On the Think data, there is some data that I can share. I can ask them if they can break it down, but I think that there maybe I can ask the question. The service is jointly funded by Nestrans, NHS Grampian, the City Council and Aberdeenshire Council, and it's hosted by Aberdeenshire Council's Public Transport Unit. So I can ask the question. Promoting it is an ongoing thing. Who would benefit from it can be quite an unpredictable thing. It isn't necessarily always a geographical issue, but I can ask the question, Councillor. And on falls, I tried to investigate further with public health colleagues that had done that piece of work in the city, and I'm still just trying to sort of bottom out what work they endeavour to take with the other local authorities, because I understand the importance of falls prevention, especially over winter.
Okay, happy enough with that, Isabel?
Yes, that's fine. Thanks very much.
Okay, I'm going to bring in Councillor Yule. Ian, please.
Thanks, Chairs. Apologies for being late, but because I was late, I couldn't make a transparency statement at the start of the meeting. So could I now make a transparency statement in relation to this item on the agenda? I am a member of the NHS Grampian Board. Having considered the objective test, I don't believe it's necessary to withdraw. Thanks.
Thank you for that. And if I'd realised that, I would have brought you in earlier. It's just that's okay. Okay, Jerry, please. Jerry Donald.
Thanks, Chair. If I can just come back on Councillor Davidson's questions, I don't think we can give you the granularity down to ward area, Councillor Davidson, but we can certainly give you what we have. In terms of trips, slips and falls, I'd be disappointed if we're not, as a health board, sharing that with our council colleagues already. But if that's not happening, we can certainly give you the data, particularly about increased numbers coming through ED, emergency department, on days like today, the majority of which is a consequence of slips, trips and falls. But we can get that data to you. Thanks. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you for that. Councillor Reid, Glenn.
Yeah, thanks, Chair, and thanks so much for this paper. I'm really impressed with it. So there's a level of work in here that is absolutely superb. Moving forward, the priority areas, it says in summary, it mentions influence, etc. As a Shire councillor, and I'm sure this is echoed by other members as well, one of the big pressures we have, or our constituents have, is the reduction in the bus services. For example, Kintour no longer has a direct bus to the hospital, and Newmarket doesn't have a direct bus route to its GP services. So elderly people actually have to take a bus into Dice, and they have to take a bus from there to actually get to the GP surgery. So I'm wondering if there's a place in this moving forward where we can actually use our influence with transport providers to have there's nothing we can guarantee, but have an aim, a target that major settlements should actually have a direct bus link, one bus link, or other form of public transport to a health provider. I think that's a target that we should go for.
Yes, Andrew, do you want to comment?
I mean, I think there's a lot of journeys that, I guess, in an ideal world, people would have direct bus journeys. Probably also just sort of like caveat the idea that all of the trips to people's appointments or to ARI, that increasingly people are accessing sort of different services in their community. So I would suggest that actually in reality it's the sort of mix of demand responsive transport, commercial transport, the voluntary sector. But I don't disagree that it would be better if people could have direct trips to the location that they need to go to.
I think at this point I'll bring in Paul. Paul Finch, please.
Yeah, thanks very much. I chair this subgroup looking at access to transport and health. I have been a passionate interest in making sure that there is access across all settlements with the appropriate means to the key facilities, working with the people at ARI. I guess in respect to the question, often it is not only about access to health, it's around access to wider services as well. But I totally understand the necessity and the essential nature of the access to health. The public transport unit at the moment are just about to do a review of in Aberdeenshire in terms of their public transport network and priorities. And alongside the local transport strategy, I think that's possibly a key opportunity to make the case for the sorts of policy ambition that's been communicated by Councillor Reid. And there's a policy opportunity at that point to try and influence that work going forward. Thanks.
Chair, could I possibly come back?
I'm wondering if I can bring in Jerry. I'm wondering if you're coming in on the same topic first, if that's okay, Glenn.
Of course.
I am indeed, Chair. I think Councillor Reid's aspiration is not unreasonable. I think as a health transport action plan, we should be aiming to do this, but just like to caveat that some communities are just so small that it's not profitable enough to run a bus service. So we've got to look at the volunteer driver support and other third sector agencies to support communities as well. But Councillor Reid, we'll take your comment on board and try and address that as best we can. Thank you.
Glenn, you want to come back?
Yeah, thanks, Jerry. Thanks, Andrew, and thanks, Paul, for that. I'll give you the slight background behind it. I mean, I realise that some communities aren't big enough, etc. But for example, there's Kintour, a community of 5,000 people, and just last year, Stagecoach decided to basically switch the bus. So it went from always having a bus connection direct to ARI to no longer having it. And when I reasoned with Stagecoach, why they were doing this, because I had so many complaints about people that couldn't actually go to hospitals direct now. They said, well, they'd never tried it going along Hilton, so they were going to go there instead. So I mean, yeah, so you already had an existing bus route that was switched away from the hospital, and so many people then suddenly didn't actually have it. Likewise, Newmarket and Kingseat, they have a population of about 3,000, and their local GP practice is in Dice, and it's 2 buses for them. So I'm not saying this is something we say, oh, this must happen, but it should be an aspiration for communities of a reasonable size to actually have reasonable access, direct access by 1 bus, whatever, or other public transport to their actual GP or hospital.
That is our vision. Just
Thanks, but I never saw it in there, but that's thanks.
Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'll move on to Colin, please. Quick questions.
Yeah, sorry, be quick. Yeah, really good report. Thanks, Andrew. It's good reading. There's just one thing. I was just wondering if you, as one of your partners or people that you talk to, have you talked to Grampian Disability Sport about their adaptive bikes, Bothy's project? I mean, the work Fiona does is absolutely fantastic there. There was just a quick anecdote about a chap that goes along there with Parkinson's, and his wife says that after he comes away from the bike sessions, but with them, he's like a different man. You know, he can move a lot better even the day after. So on that, but sorry, it was just a linkage if you hadn't already done it. But
no, we have that link. We did I mean, it's probably pre-pandemic now, but we used to do food for thought lunch events, and did one for an audience on the question, is active travel inclusive, and tried to sort of pose such examples as how we could sort of make that more inclusive. So it is trying to make sure that we're not leaving out disadvantaged groups as part of what we're trying to steer things in that direction.
all right, thank you.
Okay, with that, I don't see any other hands, so I'll take it we're happy with the recommendations as set out on page 48 in relation to the annual report 2022-23. Okay, and with that, we'll move on to item 6.2, which is the Freight Action Plan, Rail Freight Terminals, Aberdeen South Study. And it's Paul again. You got a lot of today. It's a busy day for you.
A busy day, yes. The report updates the board on the completion of a city region deal project, focusing on issues around rail freight development and rail freight terminals, particularly in the area around south of Aberdeen Station, which is where the main concentration of activity is, although we have taken a regional review of demand. I think the key thing here is that we've gone out to all the different rail freight operators and other stakeholders in that area. We recognise that rail freight operations are commercially based, most viable with regular flows of suitable goods between rail-linked origins and destinations. And the viability increases with volume of goods and distance travels. Regionally, the amount of rail freight that's happening at the moment is relatively low, linked to transfers of bulk material and cement, etc. With the multimodal supermarket train ceasing during the COVID pandemic. The indications are that the importance of the rail electrification improvement works between Aberdeen and Central Belt are seen by the rail industry as being quite important in facilitating an increased commercial viability of these sorts of services, because they will have ability to have longer trains, heavier trains, and higher gauge clearance for the containers on the trains itself. And also more timetabling options for the routing of those services, all of which help them to maximise the commercial return on their capital investment. We considered the importance of hydrogen in the area, and we await the decarbonisation plan from Transport Scotland in terms of rail, hydrogen hauled rail. But we're also interested in the hydrogen work going on at the energy transition zone next to Aberdeen South Harbour, and keeping an eye on whether or not there might be a hydrogen export by rail going on there, because that would require additional facilities. The key actions going forward is to assist with the dissemination of the outcomes of this work and to engage with the likes of Aberdeen Harbour, ETZ and ongoing conversations with the rail freight operators to see how well we can facilitate the connections which would increase the uptake of rail freight in this area. There are 3 recommendations: to note the key findings, to instruct the strategy manager to organise the wider dissemination of the report, and to continue the review of the outcomes of the work in light of the progression of the Aberdeen to Central Belt infrastructure upgrades, but also the ongoing work that's happening at the moment on the Aberdeen, Ellen, Peterhead and Fraserburgh corridor. Thank you very much, Chair.
Okay, just looking around, do we have any questions on this report? No. Okay, so I take it we're all happy with the recommendations as they are. And with that, we'll move on. Okay, item 7 is the progress report. I guess, do we have any questions on that? I don't see any, so we will move on to item 8, which, oh, sorry, apologies, Isabel.
No, it's my fault. I was having a cough then, so.
Please, please proceed.
The progress report, it's not there, but I just wondered if, because I knew that the end of the year was an important time limit, but it was the improvements to Inch Station for accessibility, and there hasn't been an update on them, and I understood that if we didn't get an update before the turn of the year, then it would be many years before that was reconsidered. So is there any information on that?
Rob, please.
Yeah, I'll come in, but I'm afraid it's to say that there's no information at this point. We continue to press that question, and yeah, fingers crossed on that one. I think, as we've said previously, it's a matter for Department for Transport, who give an allocation of funding to accessibility across the UK, and Scotland then gets a proportion of that through the Barnett formula. But I've not yet seen the decisions from DFT on their priorities for the next 5-year period.
Thank you.
Okay, so with that, we will move on to item 8, which is publications and consultations, and it is Adam Kench. Please, Adam.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, on the 17th of November, Aberdeen City Council launched the public and stakeholder consultation for their local transport strategy, and this will be closing on the 12th of January. As part of this consultation, it has been highlighted to officers the importance of also collecting feedback on the Aberdeen Air Quality Action Plan and the Strategic Environmental Assessment. It has been agreed with City Council's officers that the Nestrans response will be submitted following the approval of the board on the 14th of February. Next is the reported Road Casualties Scotland 2022. This annual publication presents detailed statistical information about the circumstances of personal injury road traffic collisions in Scotland that are reported to and by Police Scotland statistical returns. Within the board report, members can see the key figures nationally and locally, and the board report also sets out how these figures relate to policy ambitions, both nationally and locally, and the links to the reports can be found under 3.6. Following this is the in-depth road traffic fatalities report for the years 2015 to 2020, and this report is the first of its kind and should help in the delivery of the Scotland's Road Safety Framework 2030. It does this by providing insight into the causation of fatal collisions, identifying possible countermeasures and proactive recommendations that could have prevented or reduced the severity of these collisions. And 4.3 to 4.6 detail the process and key findings for members to note. A series of 85 recommendations have been created, and the detail of these can be found in the reports, with the links provided under 4.8. Next is the Active Travel Transformation Assess Phase Summary Report, and this report explores the barriers to the development of active travel infrastructure across Scotland. Extensive stakeholder engagement was undertaken to inform the evidence base and identify the challenges and opportunities that exist. 5.4 and 5.5 set out the objective of active travel transformation and the 5 key pillars of the project. And members will recall that Nestrans and both councils made submissions to the first round of ATTF funding with no success in the region, and Appendix 1 details how funds were allocated for 23-24, and at 5.7 you will find a link to the report. 6 is following this are Cycling Scotland's annual cycling monitoring report for 2023 and also their annual report for 2022-2023. And the monitoring report has been published each year since 2015. And Appendix 2 provides 2 tables that display the current position and progress since the start in both local authorities. The latest report and the preceding editions can be found in the links provided under 6.3. 6.4 provides a summary on Cycling Scotland's annual report, and a link to the report can be found under 6.5. Finally, items 7 and 8 are two more academic reports for noting. Item 7 is an evidence review by Climate Exchange that looks at reducing car use through parking policies and explores what 5 parking interventions could have, whilst item 8 is a research paper undertaken for Nestrans Scotland by Heriot Watt University that looks at the potential of low traffic measures for healthy active ageing. The report highlights the challenges that are faced to stay active and the importance of addressing this with an ageing population. So the recommendations are that members note the publication of the documents outlined in the report and request officers prepare a report for the next board meeting on the consultation response to Aberdeen City Council's local transport strategy. Happy to answer any questions, or one of the team will help me to do so. Thank you.
Do you have any questions, comments? Oh, okay. It's Councillor MacDonald, Sandra, please.
Yeah, it's just to, maybe we've already had this information in a previous meeting, but were there any lessons learned, or did we understand why our active travel applications shown in Appendix 1 with nothing going to the northeast happened, and was there anything that we could have done going forward to ensure that the next tranche we are successful?
That wasn't certainly in my area of expertise. I'm not sure if any of the other team want to pick up on that.
Yeah, thanks. If I may, I think it's fair to say that although the map makes it look like about half of areas got the funding, the vast majority of that went to 3 or 4 local authorities. So there are local authorities that are I think probably well advanced in terms of having a regional active travel network, having staff in place within the local authorities. And there's no doubt that there are 1 or 2 authorities that are ahead of the game, and they have been successful in that funding. Transport Scotland are at pains to point out that this was the first year, and future years we're looking for local authorities to be in a position where they're able to deliver on the ground much more readily. And that's what we're trying to do in terms of getting a pipeline of projects prepared, working really closely with our 2 local authorities and bringing forward a scheme so that we can be in a position to access funding in future years.
Thank you. And it was just a comment as well, Chair, on the Appendix 2, the table, and just that it's not particularly a trend, but well, it maybe is. Some of the data there showing that the car usage in Aberdeen is going up, and it comes back to maybe some of the discussions we had around accessibility to either walking or to buses and so on, but that is not a trend. I hope continues in that direction, to be honest, particularly proportion of journeys under 5 kilometres.
Thank you, Chair. I just wondered if I could jump in to try and answer Councillor MacDonald's question in relation to the Active Travel Transformation Fund, just specifically in relation to Aberdeen City. So officers did have a session with consultants working on behalf of Transport Scotland after that session to go through our submissions and to try and get some answers as to why we weren't successful. We've taken note of those. Some of the assessment criteria that was used under the bid wasn't necessarily clear when the bid was being submitted to us, and had we known those points were part of the assessment, we probably would have done things slightly differently. We've taken on that on board, and as Mr. Finch said in relation to the previous report, officers within the North East will be liaising on a more regular basis in advance of the next ATTF fund deadlines coming forward. But certainly with the work that we're now moving forward with Jacobs in relation to the active, the sort of network review for active travel that we've also discussed today, we're hopeful that we would be in a better position moving forward.
That's very reassuring, Chair. And I'm actually looking at the data again and wondering if I got it the wrong way around. So in that first line, for example, are we saying that 79% of journeys under 5 kilometres are now done by cycle, by active travel?
My reading of it, although I'll see if John wants to come in, my reading is that that's the number or the proportion of journeys that are under 5k, and therefore there's an implication that people could possibly walk or cycle. But my understanding is that that actually doesn't tell you what mode they are choosing, but that 3/4 of journeys are fairly short.
Chair, it's the proportion of all journeys undertaken in Aberdeen. It is based from the Scottish Household Survey, so there is a huge caveat with that because it's a very limited sample size, which is why there's the gap in the 2022 data, because the questions weren't asked. But it's the proportion of all journeys, and as Rab says, it doesn't account for modes.
Thank you.
Okay, I see no further questions, so I take it we're happy with the recommendations in 9.1. So, all right, with that, we move on to section 9, information bulletins. Paul, please.
Thanks very much, Chair. Just a quick note of some items that don't necessarily require decisions. There's an update there on press and communications in Appendix A. Get About, highlighting the Be Bright at Night safety campaign, and also the work that Nestrans is undertaking with the North East of Scotland Bus Alliance to develop a campaign around bus journeys in the city centre over the festive period, obviously linked as well to the recent traffic management changes. We're just noting that the consultation on the Aberdeen South Harbour Link Road had happened and it is recently closed, and that is now feeding into the outline business stage, conclusion of the DMRB stage, and moving forward into DMRB stage 3 of that side of work. Item 5 relates to the, again, City Region Deal funded corridor piece of work between Ellen, Peterhead, Fraserburgh and Appraisal. We're updating there on the fact that elements of this work have been undertaken in parallel with the Just Transition funded piece of work that's been sponsored by Aberdeen Grampian Chamber of Commerce and the Campaign for North East Rail, because they cover the same geographic areas. We had hoped, and the paper in front of you outlines that we were to be having 3 workshops. Unfortunately, we had to those workshops, unfortunately, we had to postpone those, and we are looking to rearrange those as drop-in sessions in the new year. However, just to highlight to all board members that there is a session on Monday, the 11th of December at Buchan House or online, where the consultants will be able to provide an update on those 2 studies and how they relate to each other, and to get feedback at this early stage from elected members to brief them on how that study is going and the key issues that have been coming through the face-to-face, sorry, the one-to-one discussions that we've had to date. Item 6 again reports on the consultation that was done on Ellen, Newborough, Foveran. I think we've reflected the outcome of that in the previous paper, just to say that that active travel consultation has closed, and it was a very strong response we got from the community at that point. So again, just the recommendations are just to note the contents of the book of this report, and happy to take any questions, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, just looking around, I see no questions, so I'll just note the recommendations. And with that, move on to item 10, conferences and presentations. Rab, please.
Thank you, Chair. Item 10 is just a list of recent and forthcoming conferences that we thought might be of interest to the board. Note that one this morning, Jennifer, is actually in Glasgow for a launch of a women's safety on public transport workshop. Transport Minister had a consultation, I think about a year ago, on women's safety in public transport, and that's the report we think was getting launched this morning. So we'll hear back from Jenny how that went. And John's going to something tomorrow in Edinburgh on 2020 and the reduction of traffic speeds in Wales, Edinburgh, and the implications for other parts of the country. So it's there really for information. I should maybe mention the last one that Andrew Stewart stepped in and did the presentation to Nestran on health and transport, but just for noting. Thanks.
Okay, I see no hands, so thank you for that, Rab. And then that takes us on to pending business and reports for future meetings. It's yourself again, Rab, please.
Thanks, Chair. Pending business is there to give members an indication of the reports that are likely to come forward over the next couple of board meetings. We've already mentioned under the meeting of the chairs, under the director's report, that the 7 RTPs have been working on a collaborative document entitled Develop to Deliver. 2, because it's the second time we've done this type of report, and we'd hope to bring that to the February board for consideration and approval. Thank you.
Okay, thank you again. I see no hands, so I guess with that, that is us concluded. That's our meeting concluded today. Thank you all for attending. Thank you. We can.
Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. If we can stop the